We're live. Yep, we're good.
Welcome to Tuesdays with Dr. Traci. Tuesdays with Dr. Traci.
Tuesdays with Dr. Traci.
New Year jam.
We gotta come put another one.
Yes, we gotta come up with another. We definitely have to get a new tune for the new year. Well, welcome. I'm so glad you all are able to join us today. So happy New Year. Okay, let me just say that first. Happy New Year, sending you love, blessings, and all types of wonderful things. Praying that those things come your way this year. So today we have Michaela Skurla. She is the event manager. Well, she's the general manager of Sankofa. But today we're bringing her on so that she can tell us about her spiritual journey in Lukume. Okay, I'm very excited to share with her. And actually, Michaela is also the brain and heart behind Tuesdays with Dr. Traci.
You're the heart, Dr. Traci.
Let's see. Now she's being sweet, you know. So, well, really, she's the reason why this exists, and it was born out of our many conversations here and with others within the Sankofa family and community. And as always, I want you all to be able to experience Sankofa, to feel it. I hope that we leave you with something that you can feel. Oh, shucks, that sounds like a good R&B song.
Mm-hmm.
Give me something you can feel.
Yeah.
You know, but we definitely want to leave you with that love of community, that collective responsibility that we have. So we're going to take a journey with Michaela today and just really kind of get a peek's view of her journey. And mindful that this is a spiritual journey, so there are some things that are quite sacred about this spiritual journey. And that means we're not going to be able to discuss it. And if I ask a question, and it steps over that line, she's gonna be like, no, not. We will not be discussing that. None of your business. Not today. At least not at this point. We have to come back for part 2 after she get past a certain point, and then there are more things that we may be able to discuss and share. But I think it's very important to be able to share about, various spiritual experiences, especially born out of the African experience, because most often those religions are often demonized, or anything outside of Christianity or Islam, or it's like it's paganism is demonized because most people don't understand it. They are not familiar with it. They don't understand it. They don't understand the importance of its cultural preservation and everything else. So we're going to talk about all that today. And so I know it's exciting. I can't wait. So I'm going to shut up so we can start getting into more about Michaela and what this journey is like. So, Michaela, I guess, and starting now, just so that the people will know and understand what is Lukume.
Okay. Also, before I answer that, I just want to say I'm a neophyte in this spiritual tradition. So, with respect to my elders and everyone in the tradition, this is not, whatever I say is not a rule of thumb. If you've heard something different, please do your own research, reach out to elders. Whatever I say is from my personal experience, and I can be wrong about something, or I could say only part of something that you might have another part of, and that's okay. But these are just my experiences. So, what was your question?
What is Lukume?
What is Lukume? Okay, Lukume is like a branch of the tree of Ifa. So Ifa will be the trunk, and then as you go up throughout the diaspora, you will see how Ifa transitioned and how it developed in different places like the Caribbean. Hoodoo will be like a branch of it in America, and Lukume is the branch in Cuba.
Yes. Okay. Very prominent in Cuba, and I guess you're wondering why, but for many of you all that are deep within your African history and African American history as such, you would know that a lot of enslaved Africans were taken to Cuba, and a very large African community there, which is why you have African indigenous religions or spiritual traditions that are practiced there through syncretism, and was most often joined with Catholicism. You see this with Santeria, Kendule. You see the different ones, and what happens is they were able to still practice these traditions by hiding them under Catholicism is celebrating the different gods or, goddesses or orishas, right, under the saints. And so that's how they were able to continue much of the traditions of Ife and able to, there are many orishas, but especially for the main orisha to be able to still celebrate them and pay homage in the various ways in which they do. Of course, there are going to be some twists, right? Because these are different, it's syncretized, so it is definitely merged with other traditional beliefs within Cuba. But that is just to give you all a little foundation and background there. And so, of course, the question is then always asked, so how did you come to know about Lukume? How did you come to get involved?
I'll answer that, and I want to go back later to more about the syncretism and how it evolved in the diaspora and how we were able to continue on despite the religion being really outlawed and like people risk life and limb to still practice, but because of the ingenuity, the creativity of our ancestors, it was able to survive today. So I have so much respect for our ancestors and how they were able to continue the tradition and pass it down, because it's not just a spiritual system, but it's how we survived also. It's how we were able to continue, how we were able to rebel. But how I got involved. So I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I was raised Christian. I grew up in different types of Christian churches, mainly Baptist church. I was baptized, all of that. I came out here, I went to Howard University, and I was exposed to different traditions, different religions. I made friends with people who practice Isheshe Ifa, which is like the traditional, quote unquote traditional, we can go more into that too. Basically the way it's practiced on the continent, or it might be a more ancient form. We can go more into that too. It's a lot of info there. But the main things that I was exposed. When I came here, I was still Christian. I would still go to church here and there, but I always felt like something was missing. Growing up, I definitely was a person who dreamt about the future a lot. Like I had some, I guess, different types of gifts that you see in the church sometimes, but if maybe if you were to bring it up in a particular church that didn't support that type of thing, then you were looked at as if something was wrong with you, So I feel like the churches that I went to as a child or as a teen, they didn't really support spiritual development in all its forms. It was only one type of way that you could worship and one type of way you could tap into your divinity. So at some point I had a real awakening, and really I was angry because I felt cheated. So after I came to DC, I learned more about, my own history, what it means to be Black in America, what it means to be an African person, because I didn't identify with being African. I call myself African American, but I didn't know what it truly meant. I wasn't connected to my roots. So the more I learned, the more I felt angry that I hadn't been exposed to this my whole life. Then I had friends, like I said, that were in the tradition. They would bring me around. They would bring me to Kongbembes and stuff. And I got my first reading. And I just felt instantly connected. And the first thing I did was start an ancestor altar, because that's what most people prescribe when you first learn about African spiritual traditions, ATRs, African traditional religions. The first thing you do is try to make contact with your ancestors and develop a relationship with them, and also develop your own discernment. So really that's how I got started, through friends. And then starting my own ancestor altar, which across the board you will see in many African traditional religions. I'm speaking specifically about Lukumi, but veneration of ancestors is something you'll see pretty much across the board.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what are some of the elements that one may find on these altars? So if someone was to walk in someone's house and they saw this, they would be able to recognize, oh, this is an altar that may be part of Centuria or the La Regla, La Lukume, or you see the altars in all of these. So what are some of the elements that most often you'll find?
So there's a difference between like altars and shrines. So usually people start off with an altar, and the way you can start off with just a candle and water. That's how I was instructed, just a candle and water. The most important thing to me, and from what I've learned, is your intention and trying to connect with the ancestors. So if, let's say, you don't have a lot of space, maybe you're in a dorm, maybe you just, you don't have a lot of space to create a big altar for them. If you have a candle and water and good intention to connect with positive ancestors, then that's the most important thing. Now, as it grows, or if you're expanding, then you want to incorporate things that your ancestors were about. So let's say you're not a Christian, however, your aunt that passed away, great aunt that passed away, was devout and read the Bible all the time. Maybe put a Bible there, put something there that they're interested in. What type of scents did they like? What was their favorite food? You can present that to them as well. So when you're having your ancestor altar or having a connection, is with an understanding that they were humans and they're still here with us. They didn't go anywhere. So what you're appeasing them by presenting them with things that they liked or participated in their lifetime. Now, also, the way we practice Lukumbi with my elders, we don't really do syncretism very much. Like, I don't have any shrines to any Christian deities. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that. We just don't in our house.
Okay, and I think that's very important. And a lot of people are like, oh, my altars and ancestors, like, oh my, like, lions, bears, oh my. No, but actually, when you think about it, when your loved one has passed on, you may keep pictures, you may keep candles. I've learned, especially with my mother passing on, I have her ashes, I have pictures of her. My godmother and god sister gifted me with a candle. It brought me to tears when they gave it to me. They gifted me with a candle. It was a pink, beautiful candle, but it has mommy's picture on it and mine. So that's there. And so there are different elements of my mom in and around in a way that I'm able to remember her. I'm able to think about her. You see this in other traditions as well, where ancestors are often remembered because they like, if you don't remember that, they're forgotten and they're lost in the afterlife. So we have to be mindful to, keep those pictures and, on birthdays, talk about them and share those funny stories is just another way. Because a lot of times when we say different, it's not as different as we think. And in many Christian homes, there are altars, and altars where we pray to God. So like you said, you might see the cross there, you might see a Bible, you might see a candle or other things, depending on if you're Protestant or if you're a Catholic. And then if so, in those various branches up under there, you might find various things if you have an altar in your home. And so this is very important, not too different. But when you're speaking about that acceptance and embracing and finding that spiritual fulfillment, because most often when people are seeking divine alignment in a relationship with God, they're talking about that void, that void that has to be filled. They feel like something is missing, that they're not connected to God. They feel kind of empty, like an empty shell. They need something to kind of light that inner flame and fire to reignite their spiritual consciousness, their divine self, and being able to connect with God and being able to grow and mature spiritually. So can you share any more about that connection that happened that gave you that fulfillment, that, say like deep moment, or that moment of spiritual enlightenment?
Oh, for sure. Like when I first started meditating, and specifically meditating with the hopes of connecting with positive ancestors who want to help me through this lifetime, I just remember sitting and I just would meditate all the time, trying to, I guess in a way, make up for lost time that I haven't been doing it. And I could just feel them there. I could feel myself being aligned with the right path in a way. And one more thing about venerating your ancestors, is a form of power, because if I saw a video like a few months ago, it was a woman on the phone like crying to her grandma. Her grandma was just like praying over her, telling her all these positive things about herself. It was really beautiful. And I was like, imagine being cut off from that after that person passes away because you're afraid to do something that has been deemed demonic. This is your loved one, someone who cared deeply for you, who wants to see the best happen for you, not only in this life, but even after they have passed away. So what you're doing is tapping into a different power that kind of goes beyond yourself, but within yourself because it's your bloodline also.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another form of divine connection. It's with them, and then also with the you can say the universe or whatever divinity you believe in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I think that is important when you think about those spiritual connections. I think we all can relate to that family member who has prayed us through, whether it be our mama, our grandmama, our aunties, those who have spoken over our lives and spoken so much positivity and words of affirmation and blessings and prayers that are probably still carrying us till this day. I know I was with my the littles this weekend, as I like to call them, and as I was rocking my niece to sleep one night, as I was holding her, I was just speaking over her life. I was praying for her. I was just speaking all types of blessings and affirmations over she and the youngest one, TGWG. I was speaking life over them because that is just so important, praying over them, asking for God to watch over them, asking for my mom and their grandparents and great grandparents and them to watch over them, to keep watch, to lead, to guide, and how important that is in our spiritual walk and our recognition of God and the spiritual world, and there being a life after this one. So I think for many, as they're searching spiritually and they're looking and seeking God and they're seeking their spiritual path, they are all seeking that sense of fulfillment. I know for me, as a Christian, through the Christian experience, I was seeking that fulfillment. I had that void. It was like you said, something missing. I knew I needed something more. And I realized that more was with God. And once I made that connection, then that spiritual consciousness began to grow, that light began to grow, that love, and so on and so forth. That's not to say that life is not without its trials and tribulations, but it's much different when you have that spiritual connection and force where you're seeking that divine alignment. So you're in your divine purpose and ending up in your divine destination, right? Everything in divine timing. And so these things are important. The other thing aspect that I saw is that a lot of times people, when they hear of the various traditions, they don't know that some of the things in which we practice, even in Christianity, were pulled from early African religions, okay, in forms of spirituality. Like, whoa, right? Yes, that is so true. And so when, like part of what the process is in Lukume, or just any with the Ife tradition, period. And those branches of it is divination, right? People hear that word and that freaks them out, right? Yeah. They're like, oh, that's the devil. No, and you get to running, and and they have the shells and the casting of shells. But then in the Bible, you hear about the casting of lots. And most people don't realize that those stones were stones that had lines and other things on them that they would take, whether it be stones or something of that sort, where they had lines and things, and they would take and they would cast them, and they believed that at the point of casting, that God would then move upon them at that time, and whatever needed to be revealed would be revealed at that time. You also hear in the Bible about those who were prophets and prophetesses, or had the gift of seeing. They were seers, or they were oracles, right? So, but then when you hear about that in other traditions, because one has been taught to demonize that which is African and that which is black, it is very hard. You turn and be like, oh, that's of the devil, that's pagan, that's this and that. But you have to realize that some of these same practices are practices that we see in the Christian or early Judaism, any of the Abrahamic religions, actually, that you see as part of their early practices. And again, some of the stories that you see in the Bible, like in the Tanakh, right? Those first 5 books have been extracted from early Egyptian or African spirituality. So that's something to take into account as well. So it's like, before you be like doing this, you really have to do your research in history. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about are women. And women in spirituality, when I look at it and research it, even in Africa, it's always talking about the power of women, African women. Yeah. And now you see that branch off into Black women throughout the diaspora and their spiritual gifts and how powerful and influential they were in that world and in their own right, which goes back to something that you were mentioning earlier, have become culture keepers. Okay, and one of the ways in being able to keep this culture is through this religious experience, right? And some of these practices. Would you like to speak on that, being a woman in this tradition, what that looks like, and dealing with some of maybe the male dominance, because we know we have babalawos and all this stuff within the tradition, just like in the church where women couldn't preach, they would give us a hard time about certain titles and things like that. So could you speak to that, about that cultural preservation, and also dealing with masculinity within this tradition?
Okay, so I was born in America, and when you practice a tradition that's somewhat outside of your culture overall, there are different perspectives that you have to get used to. Now, I'm not saying that misogyny doesn't exist in the tradition. It's just that what one might perceive as misogyny might not be what it is, and that's something I had to learn. Like, I had a really hard head coming into this. Um, I had a because okay, so misogyny exists within whatever religion that you're gonna encounter, and simultaneously you have elders who maybe practice a little misogyny, but that doesn't mean that whatever they're telling you isn't true. And there's a certain level of respect you have to have, regardless. Not saying if you're being abused or anything like that. Definitely practice discernment, but people have character flaws no matter where you go, and it doesn't make them a bad leader, a bad elder, or anything like that. It's just a matter of humbling yourself. So I definitely had to learn how to humble myself and not look at things from one perspective. As far as women in this tradition, definitely in Lukumi, it's not 100% rule, but overall, you won't see very many female ears. The ears, the term. Um, so I don't want to step on no toes. That's why I'm speaking very carefully. If you go to Isheshe, which is like the more traditional form of Ifa in West Africa, I'm saying West Africa, not just Nigeria, because Ifa has been practiced in many different regions in West Africa, even though Yoruba land is the most common place where people go to become initiated. You will see that there are traditions that initiate women into Ifa, like both hands would say, like when you make Ifa and you become an Iya. Mm-hmm. There are traditions that do, and there are traditions that don't. Why? You can go back and look at some traditions. There might be actual reasons, and then there are some traditions where they started doing that maybe because of power struggle. Just like in any religion, like I said, you're gonna have people who take advantage of power. Now, as far as women being culture keepers, if you look at Cuba, a lot of the ancient history, not ancient, but if you go back a few hundred years, you'll see that women were the main people who were initiating people in the tradition. To start off, a lot of women carried the tradition over from the continent to Cuba with them and are responsible for the tradition growing. And why is that important? The religion, the spiritual tradition of Ifa Lukumi is one of the ways that we practice resistance. So if you're looking at how someone made the travel through the middle passage, and they're able to keep their sanity intact enough and remember their traditions and their spiritual ceremonies intact enough to teach not only one person but for it to grow. They say if you teach a woman, well, you teach a what's the saying? You teach a village. So you really see that in the Lukumi tradition and in Ifa in general.
Yeah. And I think that's very important because social structures, political climates, culture at the time is really important. So you think about colonialism and how colonialism impacted the view and value of women wherever it happened, but definitely throughout Africa and in the New World. Okay, you definitely see the impacts of European thinking in and around women and womanhood. Whereas in Africa, especially Middle East traditions, even with patriarchal systems, women still were not devalued. They were valued very much within the societies. They had a lot of freedom. They could buy and sell land in many African traditions and societies. However, with the penetration of Europeans, that began to change. And women were stripped of a lot of their power, influence, and value with spiritual now spiritual temples or wherever, because those attitudes will come. So now you see this move, United Nations, everybody saying, the importance of women, the importance of African women. We must center them again. We must invest in them. We must make sure they have access to education, because if women have been invested in, then Africa would be twice the economic giant, and all of these. We was like, we knew that women. That's why women were valued in the first place. But you
If you
came
really
and
want
took
to look
that.
at society, you want to see how the women are being treated.
Yes.
And they'll show you how far the society has really come.
Yes. So I think that is important, and probably why you see a decline, or why there was a decline as it related to women. But it's different. And I think we should also talk about that change, because in Christianity, we're starting to see, especially with Black, amongst, African Americans, or those who have African descent, they are starting to reconnect to some of those roots. And don't be surprised that I know there are many who practice Christianity or Islam, as well as many of the African traditional religions. They don't see them as in conflict. Okay, they see them as in aiding. They see them of the same type of origin. And when you start talking about gods, and see, most often when we see gods and goddesses, we are thinking of several like head gods and several head gods. No, most often gods and goddesses, like, or the rishas, are seen like on the level of angels in Christianity, in that sense of deities, and still with a lot of power. Angels had powers and influence and over regions and everything else. So you see the same concept. But when you start talking about gods like with Ra, or Atum, right? Or Oludumare, or Orun. These are speaking of more of the head god structures, the god head, and then you start to see these dualities up under that, with male and female energy, and the reflection of male and female gods. So you can see how women were valued, in the sense that you even see them reflected in the divine, and in very powerful and influential ways. So we must be mindful of the value in life that women carry. And I think that is part of the culture that is preserved and kept, and part of that connection that helps us connect to the roots. But what I was going to say is that there have been people and youth, especially, leaving their Christian experience for this deeper African experience. And what would you like to say in reference to that?
Sure. I've been seeing a lot of people become more curious about, African traditional religions in general. I've also, on the flip side, which is why I feel like this conversation is so important, I've been seeing a lot of people going back to really demonizing anything that is not of Jesus, is not of Christianity. Like, I've been seeing so much fear, which is so dangerous, especially for people who are being attacked worldwide. Anti-Blackness across the board is something that we should all be concerned with. And if we're continuing to turn our back on indigenous spiritual technology that our ancestors left for us, then our future would look very bleak if the trend continues in the way that I've seen it happen. But to the people who are curious and who have returned, like myself, to the tradition, and who see how powerful it can be, because it's aligning you to your destiny. And think about not just one person, but a whole group, communities that are returning or learning how to align themselves with their destiny. Think about when, like, different events we've had at Sankofa, we call libation before that, and we're calling the ancestors into the room because they are a power source. Imagine big groups, big communities doing that, and we're all aligning ourselves to one trajectory, one goal, which would be self-determination. Imagine if we were all doing that at the same time. Like, that's such a powerful thing to think about, or goal to have. So it's really nice that people are returning to this, or at least curious and open, because it shows a lack of fear, which is one of the tools that was used and still being used to control us. A colonial tool that's being used, even being used by people who look like us. Mm-hmm. So I feel like as long as people are open and not being controlled, it's always a good thing.
Yes, and there's nothing wrong with learning. Mm-hmm. And you can learn something different, and you don't have to embrace it as your pathway, and that's fine. But you don't have to demonize the person who does. And it's with any spiritual gift or religious tradition. I'm just always weary and mindful of anyone that would use it for evil. Mm-hmm. And that's from Christianity to Islam, Judaism, I don't care, you name it, any other traditional religion within Africa and communities around the world, okay? It does not matter. But if your goal is to for people to be connected to God and for spiritual enlightenment, okay, for spiritual enlightenment, for growth, for the betterment of humanity, that is something definitely to be looked at. And for many of us, we have during Black History Month these interfaith meetings and prayer meetings and conferences, you know, especially in honor of our ancestors and the variety of religions that was reflected there, the variety of philosophical thought. And there are many systems of thought under the African umbrella, right. You know, and so we share in that, and it is a way that we are able to come together to try to seek out peace and a better experience for humanity across the board, right? So I think we can learn to do this without necessarily demonizing it. And I just think you're right, it is a very important conversation that we have to continue to have in our communities and even in our churches, you know, because we can become so, you know, dogmatic in our religious pursuits that we lose our human touch and our sense of humanity and our love for humanity. You know, in Christianity, we talk about often that love, the love principle, you know, and how is that being reflected? And most often, the people who were rejected were the ones, especially in Christianity, that Jesus embraced. Oh, okay. You know, it was the church folk that created the biggest problem for Jesus. Okay. You know, in their laws and restrictions and all of these things. So I think in the church, we have to be mindful and not be afraid to have those conversations. And again, many of the things that we demonize in other traditions are things that were practiced and done in Christianity or in Judaism, from which Christianity springs, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to look at that a whole lot closer before we start demonizing practices of other people. And you brought up libation. Mm-hmm. I think that's so beautiful and important. And you know, we do this a lot, you know, most traditions have some form of prayer or meditation, but when you're pouring out libation in honor of God to say thank you, like you see in some traditions, I know in South Africa, you know, they will pour out beer sometimes to honor God and to say thank you before they partook of the beer or anything else, you know, that they would say thank you. Mm-hmm. Now here is a little different. We didn't remix that thing, and so we do it for the homies. Right. You know, we pour out the 40s for the homies. Mm-hmm. I mean, but it's still along the same line thinking. But if you ever experience someone doing a libation, it is one of the most beautiful things you can experience, because not only are they honoring God, but you can hear them honor those who have come before them. So we honor during that time our ancestors who shared their blood, who gave their lives, who sacrificed so much so that we may have certain freedoms and things. I know we're still fighting and still struggling. We're still on this journey, but to be able to honor them in that way at that moment, and to take and pour that into a plant, and to see that plants grow and how you water the plant and that thing grows and give life, and how our ancestors have given us life, and how we're able to continue to grow and continue to journey on this path is so amazing and beautiful. I speak of, Dr. Greg Carr. Some of you all may be familiar with him, but the first couple of times I heard him do a libation, I was blown away because he really goes in. He becomes, spirit, disconnected. You see him take spiritual flight and become so passionate to the point of tears in having this spiritual experience, being able to connect to God and honor and connect with the ancestors, his family, most immediate family members, and people of our Black beloved community, and so on and so forth. And we go back even into, since our history does not start with enslavement, okay? But hey, yeah, that Ashe, which is life force, right? We need to speak that more often, Ashe, right? But as we talk about that and how we understand our history starting over millenniums ago and what that looks like in those early societies or civilizations, and what has been passed down through us with coded in our own DNA, it changes things. So when you see that type of beauty at that point, and while he is a master teacher in and of his own right, but to see him at that is something very beautiful to see. So when you see people in a libation, but again, somebody hear libation, they thinking, oh, witches and cocktails and all types of things. They like, oh, they're going straight to hell. That's the devil, And, but I mean, because this is what people thinking, like, oh my God, a libation, what is that? Like smoking thing, yes, incense, and then you're like, oh God, they like the incense, they're coming up weed, I don't know, what is it, that's of the devil too. But no, because incense was often used in our ceremonies, even in Judean Christian, come on now. So we still burning those things, and how that was used to cleanse the air or to cleanse the atmosphere spiritually and so on and so forth, and for other medicinal benefits, okay? So we have to learn to talk about those things that we are afraid to enter into when we start talking about levitation and all these spiritual experiences, even that which we see in the Bible from the beginning to the end. People elevating and having these spiritual out-of-body experiences. Somebody say that now, you say, go and get it, go straight to hell. That's of the devil. We're going to pray over you. You're going to be on the altar, the floor. They're going to get that holy water and pour that and have that spirit come up out of you, okay? But, I got to make fun. I got to have fun while doing this. But I think these things are important. So what is like one of the most important principles that you find in Lukume that really grounds you, that says, you know what, I love Lukume because of this?
Ooh, that's hard to narrow down to just one, but I think the biggest thing, like Ifa in general, is Iwafele, which is good characters, how it will be translated, because you can do all your ceremonies right, you can do all your ebos right, you can know how to chant, you can know how to pour libation, but if your character is crooked, your manifestations are going to be crooked. Your path is, you're on the path, but how are you really living your life? Are you true of what's the in my arts? Are you true of
what with Mayat?
Like
with truth and justice, balance,
there's
harmony.
There's a term. It's like, were you true of heart or true of voice or something like that? Like, are you doing what you say you're gonna do?
Yeah.
Are you
good speech?
Exactly.
Yes.
Are you living up to the way that you're supposed to? And it doesn't mean that you're perfect. Right. It just means with everything that you do, you have good intentions. If you make a mistake, you're able to be accountable for it. You're teachable. You're humble. That's a big thing that I had to learn was being humble, because even if you're a person who's constantly trying to grow and you think you think your self critiques and you don't need to learn, or you don't really need to listen, be humble. Listen to your elders. Find a trusted elder. Make sure that this is someone who isn't utilizing their power just to have power over you. Practice your own discernment, because that's one of the biggest things that's one of the biggest things I learned also is having my own discernment. Like, I know how to ask my I know how to ask questions and to ask the Orishas for things, but before I even go to them, have I checked with myself? Have I checked in with my own Ori, which is the consciousness, not the human consciousness, but like the divine spiritual connection you have before you enter this body? Have you checked in with yourself first before you sought divination, before you sought a reading? So just really learning about myself, connecting with ancestors, and really gaining a deeper understanding of how they help you in this life. You were talking about people who were maybe doctors, lawyers, builders, electricians. Maybe somebody was good at cooking or whatever it is. You have that in your back pocket, and you're not going, you're not going to develop that relationship. So
That's
yeah.
amazing. Girl, you're just preaching, my God. Like this was church, pastor played, somebody say amen. The doors of the church are open. But and she brought up some very important principles, good character, and I think that is something that we seek in all religions, definitely in Christianity, right? Walk that righteousness, walk in a certain way, and we're bringing up good character, and you're bringing up mayat, and we're thinking about early on with meta nature, good speech, because that is a reflection of who you are, and then as you're thinking, so are you speaking, and as you're thinking and speaking, so are you acting. Your behavior. So it's important. You can know to do all the great things in the world, but if you don't have good character, if your reputation sucks because you don't have good character, that's a lot to be said. And that's the same thing. You can go around doing all these wonderful things, but if your soul ain't right, your heart not right, you are not in divine alignment, and that's gonna come to bite you in the soul booty at some point or another. Okay, you're gonna feel that you're gonna have to pay for that. I see and understand why the ancients took the afterlife so seriously. They didn't play when it came to that thing. They had stuff written out for them. It was all on their walls and their funeral, and their tombs and things. They was like, look, we're going to get there. The people like they were going to get there. They started working on this before they even died. Like, this is how important this was to invest, to make sure that they were able to get past those 42 judges, especially early period, to get to the afterlife or in any other tradition, because it was important to be able to reach that pinnacle, that spiritual pinnacle of the afterlife and that peace and that goodness, as we will call it, some traditions, heaven, right? So I think that that was very important. But you also talked about humility. How important it is to be and teachable. That was the one. My God, to be teachable and to be open to learn, but not to be a fool. Because that part when people can manipulate you and use their spiritual powers or strength or mind, their Jedi man power to to manipulate you, that's very important. So when we see these cases where people are committing suicide with their leaders, don't you drink that Kool-Aid. Do not drink the Kool-Aid, okay? I don't care what they tell you. I don't even tell you if they tell you you're gonna levitate. You're going to see God. You're going to see Jesus. I don't care. Or Richard, I don't care who they say. You're going to see. Don't you drink that Kool-Aid. Don't do it. You have to have a mind and a conscience, spiritual conscience of your own. God has given you good common sense. You have to use that thing. You have spiritual awareness and discernment. Tap into that. Don't be anybody's fool, okay? Don't let anyone sexually abuse you or anything else in any church, any spiritual temple. I don't care. Don't you be in there doing that stuff. Don't do it. Don't let them take you out like that. That is not of God. That is not of a spiritual righteousness. Don't you be now. If you're doing stuff and you're an adult and you choose to do things out on your own, then that's your business. You deal with that and your good character and all these other things. That's between you and the God you serve. But do not be manipulated in that way. So that being teachable, I think, is very important, to be willing to learn, because that's what we're talking about today. Being able to learn, being teachable, learning, and you'll learn to take the meat and throw out the bones with everything that you learn as it relates to knowledge and information and being spiritually aware, and things that we can learn from each other and from different traditions that may help you in your spiritual growth, period. And that importance about meditating and being able to tap into your own spiritual consciousness and to find yourself and to hear God on your own for yourself. Because not everybody can do that. You have to be careful who you're connected to, right? Absolutely. Who you're connecting with spiritually. Because within you all's traditions, you all have what are called godparents, right?
Yeah.
For some, yeah.
Yep, definitely. So you want to talk about like how to use your own discernment in order to make sure you're connecting with the right people. If you got a gut feeling, and people talk. Listen. Right. I was gonna say that, but I wasn't gonna say it. Exactly. So listen, like everyone's not gonna have a story if maybe something wasn't wrong. Maybe you want to do some investigations. Definitely for people who are just stepping out. I've seen it a bunch of times where people are curious about a tradition and they start going to this person, that person, that person, they really open themselves up and make themselves vulnerable. So really do your homework as best as possible. Sit and ask for direction from your ori or from whatever you might call it. Ask for discernment from yourself and from your ancestors. One of the other things I want to bring up before we go is the tolerance that I learned, because like when we first started speaking, I talked about how I had an anger after leaving Christianity, but finding this tradition is also what helped me to get over that anger and to develop more tolerance for people in general. So the Odu Ifa is the corpus of Ifa. It's like so it's an oral tradition, but we have 256 Odu. These are how people divine. So something you cast the carry or the king or the equile, and it comes up with these dots or numbers, and that corresponds with an Odu, and that Odu is pertaining to the person and what has come up for the person. Mm-hmm. So there are many different stories that can pertain to one what did I say? It's called Odu. Mm-hmm. So in these Odu, there are often stories about Orisha. And some of these Orisha are actually elevated ancestors. Like these are people that actually existed in ancient times that have undergone so much transformation that they are now Orisha. Like an example would be, I believe, I could be wrong, but Obatala, he was actually like a warrior king, like killing people left and right. But now he's the owner of white. Yeah. Why is he the owner of white? Because if he kill anybody, if he does anything like that, you're gonna know it's gonna be on the clothes. So that speaks about transformation and how things can change. People can change. Situations can change. I was able to understand that Christianity as a whole isn't a bad tradition. Isn't something that I should turn my nose up at when people practice it. Like I felt a type of way if I came across someone. I'm like, oh, you're still doing that. That's kind of the time I was on when I first came over to this side of things. But then I understood that spirit doesn't have to be bound to a religion. It doesn't matter what the person practices because everyone is divine. And the other side of that also with tolerance is as you venerate your ancestors, maybe someone who you might not agree with so much in this lifetime, but you understand they are also going through transformation even on the other side. And there's a tolerance you can have in that regards too. And in healing that aspect, you're healing them and you're healing yourself and you're healing your bloodline.
Yes. And you see many saints that are deified. This happens in, definitely in our tradition and then Catholicism. And then in some traditions they will pray to Saint Paul or Saint Mark, Saint Luke. In different ones. So you will see that as well. So that's nothing different. Again, most often things that people would say, "Oh, that's different," is really not. Especially when you're comparing, if you're doing a contrast and comparison with Christianity and other traditional religions and just the importance of it. So I think that we have been able to cover a lot. There's just been one burning question, and then we're going to be out of here. Okay? All right. But is the how do you choose the Orisha, or what's the process for knowing if the Orisha has chosen you?
Well, you get a reading. That's the only way. It's very important to know that this is not a self-initiating tradition. You can't, decide one day, oh, you know what, I'm a child of Ogun, or I'm a child of whoever you think you might identify with. That's not something for you to identify. You have to go to an elder a Babalao or an Ia who's going to do a reading for you, and they will tell you get something called an Itefa or you get an Ishefa. Is that right? Itefa is another word. I don't think I'm saying the second word right. But essentially, it's a reading where they can tell you what path you're on and who is claiming your head. Sorry, Mom, not right now.
She done talked to her mom, see it, mom, feeling it. Right. She's like, I'm feeling my child's spirit. Okay.
Right. But yeah, so it's not for you to decide. You have to please don't go to YouTube. Don't go to, you can't get a tarot card reading done and they tell you can't do that. There are specific, there are ways, there are traditions, there are specific ceremonies, there are specific rituals that are involved.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So don't be up there now going home but you can burn a candle now you know you
Right.
with the goddess or Shun or something like that.
That ain't no Shun. That's somebody else.
Okay.
I don't know who that is.
Don't get hooked up though. You know, do your homework with any religion. I would encourage you to do your homework with any leader, with any church or any spiritual temple you are joining. I don't care what it is. Do your homework. Do your homework on that person, on that leader within that particular tradition. Like he said, the grapevine is real within the Black community. So things you have to keep your ears, your spiritual ears open and eyes open.
Like that, spiritual ears.
Yes, yes. And would you like to tell the people what that is? And then with the colors, yep, with your necklaces, yep, because I think it's very important.
Yeah, what I'm wearing are elekes. I am currently in my Iyawo year. If you don't know what that is, in Ifa Lukumi, you have a year plus 7 days where you are wearing all white. You're being initiated into priesthood. I am Omo Oshun, and the difference between what you will see between Lukumi and Isheshe is that when you initiate into the priesthood in Lukumi, you get, it seems like a lot more Orisha to go with you. So you'll see the different colors represent the different Orisha, and even within the same Orisha, the Orishas have different paths. So you might see variations of colors and patterns based on the person's path that they have. So this is why I'm wearing this, and this is why I'm wearing all white.
Okay. So there you all have it, folks, from Michaela Skerlock herself and her spiritual journey in Lukume. This has been such a fun and exciting conversation. But you see, this is how Michaela and I talk all the time. We ask each other questions. A lot of times, believe it or not, she's actually asking me questions. It's like she be interrogating me for real, you know. And I'm like, let me think about that. Okay, but no, this is how we get down. These are the types of conversation that we have. And now you understand and see why I love Michaela so much. She has a very beautiful spirit and heart. Yes, and this is another reason why I come and so many others come to Sankofa, because you get to connect and meet so many wonderful people like Michaela. I mean, Michaela is unique in and of herself, as each and every person is, of course, right? But that type of love, that type of community, that type of spirit in which we are able to grow as iron sharpen iron, so do we. So we would like to bid you farewell. Now, we don't meet next week, but the week after, because we've switched to every other week, okay? So we will be coming in, and I'm looking forward to who will be joining us during that time. So look, we love you. Stay well. Until next time, continue to prosper and be of good health. Continue to walk in love. And you hear Michaela, she said Ashe. So yes, continue to walk in that divine life force and be a change agent and change lives as you are changing and evolving and becoming the person, the divine person that you believe God would have you to be. So keep your spiritual ears, mind and eyes open to what God is telling you. So until next time, much love and stay safe out here in these streets, okay? Peace out. Much love.
Gang, gang. Bye, y'all.